In 2018, 54 African countries came together and signed an agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. The establishment was meant to achieve economic integration in Africa. It goes without saying that African countries have different requirements and capacities to be able to live up to the requirements of the agreement. Now, in conversation today, we'd like to delve into the challenges presented by this agreement, the benefits, and how we can leverage them as a nation and as small medium enterprises. In conversation today, we have Mr. Getlaitse, a seasoned supply chain specialist who's also a facilitator of the upcoming Supply Chain Summit, which will be hosted on the 6th to the 7th of November 2024. Welcome to Conversations in Supply Chain. I'm your host, Boto. Mr. Getlaitse, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Boto. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm surviving.
Okay. We're happy to have you on Conversations in Supply Chain.
I'm also more than happy to discuss some of this very interesting, very close to me in terms of my profession. And while coming in and thanking you for this opportunity, let me just start with, just like in any, I can say in any forums whereby people have got beliefs and faith in something, they start with a prayer.
Yes.
And there's a prayer for me in supply chain that I always say. I quote Dave Waters. He says, supply chain is like nature. It's all around us. So everything that you see today, including myself, is supply chain.
Has to do with supply chain, that's true.
That's wonderful.
Great. So the current run now, and also with the upcoming summit, is we're looking into the African Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
We want to know more about it. We want to know what opportunities we have or what does it present to us. I want us to highlight the objectives of the agreement and relate it to the supply chain field.
Thank you very much. The main objective of Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is, let me just consolidate it so that I don't break it down to a lot of pieces. I would say is a tapestry of objectives that looks at trying by all means to boost trade in Africa, intra-trade. That is from production, more especially to the customer, to the consumer. How can Africa leverage on everything that is around them in terms of production, trade within? How do countries can trade? What are the facets of trade in Africa? Yes.
Seeing that we already had different bilateral agreements in Africa, we had SADC, we have ECOWAS. Why do you think it's important for us to also have this agreement?
Definitely, it's different because you'll realize that SADC and ECOWAS are regional in Africa. There is the southern part of it, there is the central part of it, there is the northern part of Africa. But this one, it encompasses the entire, it integrates the entire Africa continent. That is the biggest difference. While others look at you can say the zones, but this one combines the whole zone as Africa as a continent. That is the biggest difference. And it tries to boost the economy of Africa as a continent, not as a region, but as a continent, and compete with other continents.
All right. I must say that the primary thought of supply chain is mainly transport logistics. People, and I would say laymen, when you speak supply chain, that probably think in transport logistics and look at it into that spectrum. I want you to help us understand supply chain is an entirety. What can you say with regards to that?
I'll probably piggyback on my first quote. supply chain is everything around us. It's like nature. You know, you look at everything that you see, talks is about supply chain. Therefore, yes, I agree with you, Intelibuto, that most people look at supply chain, some not even in terms of transport only. Some look at supply chain as procurement. Some look at it as from the perspective of a warehouse. Like I was saying, but then supply chain is tapestry. Is it right from the extraction of the resources or the raw material that you use to the consumption, but not only the material aspect of it, right? Now, there is also information flow within those materials, within those, and expertise. I'm part of the supply chain. I'm a part of a product of a supply chain. As I'm here today, from where I am to here, I used a vehicle to come here, which is supply chain, to come and supply my expertise, isn't it? Or our discussion here, or to share with the community of Botswana, what is it all about? The community of supply chain, what is it all about? So right from the extraction of the product or the raw material to the consumption and back again to the entire cycle, because there is also recycling, there is also returns, there is also, you know, the movement of both goods, services, and works moving together. But they don't move alone, they move with information. And also you look at that, it also moves finance, which is the economy aspect of it. So that is supply chain in essence.
Great. I like that you mentioned information flow, because we call this era the information era.
Yes.
We share a lot of information.
Yes.
We have social media. There's widespread a lot of information sharing. I can't shy away from the fact that artificial intelligence, rather, it's one of the rampant topics that we're talking about. And I have seen that it's also a key topic that we're going to delve into at the summit. Okay. I must say, what are your thoughts on how it's going to revolutionize the supply chain field in the modern day?
Thank you. Technology, if you look at that, there are many drivers of supply chain.
Yes.
There is the transport logistics, there is the manufacturing aspect of it, there is the railroad, air transportation. There is also the resources that we use in supply chain. And one of the key areas is information technology. There is also digitalization aspect of it, which is now, if you look at our national agenda, in some of the areas, we are looking at digitalizing Botswana.
Yes.
But the most important thing is that when you set the ground for supply chain, you need to look into these factors. They are very, very important. Therefore, looking at Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is a policy that is there. To bring it to operation, we need to operationalize it and bring it to the ground so that we can see the result, isn't it?
Yes.
So that we can see the benefit of it. Therefore, trade, it talks of interaction, movement from one area to another. Therefore, to liberalize this, we not only look at tariffs. Now you talked of artificial intelligence, and it talks of what? Information technology. It talks of digitalization. How much of Africa do we know about the landscape and the penetration of internet things, blockchains that we talk about in supply chain, and that we talk about artificial intelligence? Then modern supply chain is fully agile, is very, very agile and volatile because it's influenced by data. And if you look at the trends of supply chain, 2024 trends, supply chain trends, the number one is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
The number 2 is data analytics. So you can see that step number 1 is dependent on step number 2 in terms of analyzing your data and be able to look at that data and see the trends and where you need to buy. But the issue here that I'm trying to bring on is when you look at those, how far are we developed in terms of those areas as Africa? In order for us to benefit from artificial intelligence, digitalization, if I have to trade with North Africa, I need to know how far they are in that sphere.
Yes.
If I need to trade with Central Africa, I need to know how far they are. Therefore, we need to look at those statistics, the demographics of our production. Where is cocoa produced? Where is maize produced in Africa? At how much volume? Who consumes what? At what rate? If I have to move my goods from Ghana, for example, to Botswana, how do I bring them here? What are their policies? What are their regulations? What governs their production? What are the standards that they use? Those things are data that needs to be consumed. And from the artificial intelligence and your blockchains and movement of goods, that's how you work around. But if some of the countries are far back, others are at an advanced stage in terms of information technology, will be lacking, and those will be the hindrances and the challenges that we face. So we need to, in order to operationalize Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, those are some of the important things that when we talk of digitalization, we don't talk of digitalization only in Southern Africa or in SADC or ACOS, we talk about it as a continent. When you talk about information technology, we look at it from that perspective. And in order for this agreement to be in operation, we need to bring it to that level.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you brought up the level of preparedness in different countries. We are at different capacities for us to be able to implement this. So where does that conversation begin? And where would you say for small, medium enterprises, it's important for them at that space to identify the data and do their analytics so that they can know how to trade with Ghana? Or it's a space of a regional thing? Where does that conversation begin on preparedness?
Look, we need to, in order for us to be prepared, Africa Continental Free Trade, as an agreement, it needs to be cascaded.
Yes.
Now, this is where things like the summits comes in order to capacitate now procurement professionals or supply chain professionals within that. But it doesn't have to stop there. For example, Botswana Manufacturing Association, your mining sectors, your SMMEs, forums, we need to cascade this, how they can benefit from this agreement. And they need to be enabled to go into this information technology and the internet things. We call them internet
of things.
Internet of things, yes. So they need to be able to move into that level.
Yes.
No, somebody at the Massimo there should be able now to log in. You're going to be a modern farmer, right? So you need to be able to take your laptop to go there and be able to analyze. If I produce garlic, where will I be able to sell it? So it encompasses a lot of things. That's why I call it a tapestry.
Yes.
of the supply chain.
Oh, sorry.
It's very exciting because I dream and sleep supply chain.
Okay, lovely. I think now this also brings me to this conversation, the risk.
Yeah.
we talk of risk a lot in supply chain. We talk of risk management and mitigation in supply chain, but we've been speaking all about it from a point of receiving and selling a lot. So now I'm thinking, when this agreement was introduced, a lot of people were running with the idea that we only want to open border and leave it at that. So how do we help people move away from the idea of the risks associated with opening border? Not only the risks, but what mitigation strategy can you propose such that we see it as a seamless proposition and people are able to buy into the idea of open border in aid of trade?
Thank you. You know, it's very interesting. So when we bring that subject, because it has got two folds of it, right? There is a risk. There's also a benefit from opening borders, right? Now, the most important thing is that, like I said, supply chain deals with data. It has to be an informed decision. Which border do you open at what level? Now, if you work it from that way, you are actually reducing the risks. The risks being, one, you know the capacity that you have as a nation or as a zone, you know, regional zone, SADC, you know the capacity that you have. Otherwise, they also know the capacity that they have in terms of what is it that they have, what can they trade on and what can they not trade on. Now, the most important thing is to set continental standards. Continental standard will define the standard or the culture of Africa. Culture holds the continent together. The culture, how do we trade in Africa? What standard are we using? When I buy a chocolate from Ghana, I need to be certain that I'm buying a certain standard of chocolate. When I buy another one in Angola, I have to know that, well, the standard is the same as the one that I get from Ghana. It might be different in names, but the standard is the same. I'm just going to give you an example. Europe has got their European Procurement Act. You see, it's a network of countries that they have come together and brought one document, one tool. Therefore, for us also, we have got Botswana Bureau of Standards, for example. We have got South African Bureau of Standards. They are different. Now, for me to trade with Ghana, for example, or Nigeria, I have to comply to their standard, right?
Yes.
But if there was one tool of Africa standards, we'll be able to trade, knowing very well that it meets the standards of Africa. And if somebody buys from another continent, they will know this, whether they buy from different countries, they will know that they are using the standard that they get. The standard that is used to extract our diamonds or process our meat in Botswana, as we trade our meat in EU and other countries. They will know that the same standard, if they were to buy the same meat from Namibia, they are buying the standard of Africa.
They're buying the standard. I love that concept.
So that is the basic aspect of it in terms of standards and accreditations of standard. Whatever you produce in your farm, in your media in other areas, they will know that this media is produced under this standard, that or this producer farmer has been accredited by Africa standard of production of maize meal.
Okay, so there's risk to it?
There is a risk to it. Now the benefit to it is that when you trade, because your product has been accredited, is able to move to any part of Africa. And even if it's a standard that is accepted, do you know that we use, for pharmaceuticals, we use FTA standard, the American standard. We know that if something is compliant with that standard or accredited to that standard, is something of a certain quality, degree of quality. Therefore, this is what is very, very critical or important about standards and accreditation of the standards?
We have in 2023 January, the World Economic Forum said Africa is likely to become a new era of global business and investment, and that consumer spending is going to increase. I want you to give a bit of light, especially when it comes to manufacturing and consumer behavior in Africa with relation to our resilient supply chains. Do you think, as member states, we're going to be able to bring that to fruition? Like, are we going to be able to increase consumer spending within Africa, looking at how consumers are behaving right now?
Thank you. Yes, we are. We have got that ability, and we've got that capacity. In terms of human resource capital, human capital, we have got so much, diversity within there. The only thing that we need to do as Africa, we need to be radical in terms of change. Yes, we need to take deliberate decisions as states to say, we're going to start manufacturing our pharmaceuticals. We probably have learned a very good lesson from COVID-19.
Yeah.
That to beg as a continent is not a nice thing, but it brought also some energy in terms of thinking outside the box, and taking, like I'm saying, aggressive decisions to say, no matter what, I'm going to spend on manufacturing, particularly in Africa. We need to bring our resources, we need to refine our resources, produce them to finished products in Africa. Steel comes from Africa, diamonds come from Africa. We have got a vast land that we can produce our own food. But you know that we still import a lot of maize. Probably, yes, there's a little bit of manufacturing in pharmaceuticals within the southern part of Africa. But if you look at it, we need to do more.
We need to be aggressive.
Do you know that we have got a vast resources of forestry that is also medicinal? Can't we turn that
especially in the northern and western Africa?
So if we do a lot around that, we'll be able to move. Even in terms of, let us cultivate a mindset of manufacturing, of innovation, right? Getting things from the beginning. Let us not depend on a vehicle that has got a steering. Let us start innovating with artificial intelligence. So I'm passionate about seeing that economy of each and every continent is dependent on its innovation and creativity in terms of production, manufacturing to finished products.
Yeah.
That is where we are. But I see that if we cultivate that mindset, I was very, very impressed when the issue of mindset change. But in supply chain also we need to move it, bring it down to mindset change in terms of our communities to start manufacturing. Don't take a lahapu to be lahapu or watermelon to be a watermelon. You can do a lot of things with that and bring it to a finished product that we can sell to other countries. Now, there is another subject that is we need to bring on board while we do that. Remember, we have got borders.
Yes.
Now, those borders, we need to find a way of liberating them. You call it liberationalizing them, right?
Okay.
Opening up borders, but there is also a risk, you know that.
Yeah.
Yes. When you open borders for trade, you are also opening borders for, those infiltration with negativity aspect of it.
And tariff revenue losses.
Yes. But remember, when you bring that goods around, you can still move them without a border. With the current technology, the border can be the point of origin. Tariffs, you can do them at the origin, at the destination through technology without having to go through the paperwork at the borders. By the border, it's just to cross that borderline of Botswana and South Africa or Namibia. But in terms of the documentation and information flow, it doesn't have to have a border.
That's another new concept that we'll have to delve into.
So there are a lot of things, but it's very, very important to have data that you analyze and it informs your decision. Don't make spontaneous decision because it can have a detrimental effect and very, very serious negative rippling effect. If you do something, you have to be very, very careful, because if you look at your clothing right now, don't look at them as they are. Know very well there is somebody somewhere who is sitting farming cotton. And that farm probably uses fertilizers. Nowadays we talk of green supply chain, ozone depletions and things like that. So you need to look at the entire thing, so that at the end of the day, your clothing doesn't impact your environment. Isn't it that the current governance statutes talk of triple P: the planet, your profits, your people? So you need to look at holistically from that perspective. That's why supply chain
It's everywhere.
is everywhere. Supply chain is like nature.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for honoring the invite.
Thank you.
You had shared a lot of thought and it was great having you. We're looking forward to the summit, and we know there's more concepts to unpack.
Definitely, Boto. I would love people to come and witness when I talk of the tapestry, the artwork of supply chain. Yes, that is what is going to be there.
Yeah.
That is going to be there, and different aspects, from the economics, from the mining, from everywhere. Those will be there. I think some of the participants will be their first time to hear about the benefits that they can derive from Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Most definitely.
Yes, and they will also be able to tease how they can bring it to operation, the challenges that they are facing and things like that. Is our standard, for example, a global standard that is recognized? Is our products the product that we can sell to? Why can't I take my goods to Nigeria? Why can't I take my goods to Ethiopia? The airline industry, the railroad industry, and there are associations that we can associate in terms of development and growth of human capital in supply chains.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. So we close off our conversation from that point. Thank you for listening in. We'll be happy to see you, happy to welcome you at the summit.